Just over 20 years ago, the Metzger family farm, now the site of Camp Happy Trails. The old farmhouse stands almost deserted. Once a bustling hub of family activity, now weeds grow over the wooden frame. The house stands in darkness, but from the adjacent barn a light can be seen. The barn is where the remain of the Metzger family now live. Their makeshift dwelling is more like an abattoir. Large metal workbenches are stained with blood. Carcasses hang from hooked chains, and a deathly stench fills the air. The hulking bulk of their only remaining son, Hans, fills the space over one of the benches where he's butchering an unidentifiable carcass. The grunting sounds from beneath his hideous pig-headed iron shade mask carry across the still night. In the corner, huddled in a pile of straw, a baby giggles contentedly as she arranges entrails to form grotesque pictures. "You cannot go on like this," Ada Metzger says quietly to her husband, her frame withered from malnutrition. "Since the baby, he has become worse. The eating, it will not stop. And now the killing. We cannot go on." "Shh, he will hear," her husband replies. "It is natural. After a new baby, the sibling is jealous. It will pass. We will return to as it was." It was 2 months later when the townsfolk eventually came to the Metzger homestead. The gossip in the town of Camp Happy Trails had become fervorous. First the animals went missing, nothing of note, but then the children, and other townsfolk. There had always been talk of the Metzgers, particularly of their hideous monster of a child, Hans. Now, with the family not having been seen for months on end, rumours raced unstopped. Isaac was the one to lead the posse to confront the Metzgers and their unholy child, to find the truth. Armed with simple weapons and carrying torches, they arrived at the Metzger farm on a cold winter's night to find the farmhouse rotting in its disrepair and the glow coming from the barn. The group approached the barn. Their hearts were in their mouths as Isaac pounded on the large double doors. "Helmut, open up! Helmut, we need to talk!" There was no response. Isaac pounded again. "Helmut, we just want to talk." Again, nothing. With fear racing through his veins, Isaac pulled the heavy wooden doors. As soon as the doors were ajar, the stench hit them. A foul, rotting stench that could not be described. Isaac bent over, emptying the contents of his stomach to the floor. Other members of the group recoiled in revulsion at the stench. As the men wrapped cloth over their faces to mask the putrid smell, a group of them heaved the doors fully open. Words are not enough to describe the sight they saw. The old hay barn was awash with rotting remains. Animals, but not only that. From the heavy hooked chains hung the bodies of people, limbs missing, butchered. Blood stained almost every inch of the barn, and entrails were strewn across the floor like confetti at a wedding. In the corner, just to the right of the doorway, lay the emaciated but recognisable bodies of Ada and Helmut Metzger. As the door opened, the massive Metzger child looked up from his butcher's workbench halfway down the barn. The light from the torches cast illuminations that danced on his hideous iron mask like imps frolicking at the gates of hell. Hans bellowed at the interruption to his work. The noise made 3 of the men turn and flee. He reached down for a huge sledgehammer leaning against the workbench. Lifting it with ease, he advanced slowly towards the remains of the posse. Malachi acted first, the fire in his heart fueled by the sight of his 12-year-old son hanging from one of the hooks. He strode towards Hans and launched the burning torch he was carrying straight at the monster. The torch hit Hans square on the chest, exploding in flames. Hans screamed as the torch fell to the floor, igniting the blood-stained hay littering the barn. The fire moved at unholy speed, almost instantaneously engulfing the monster. Hans staggered backwards as a tinder-dry beam from the barn roof crashed on top of him. The fire grew hotter, heating his metal mask and fusing the flesh beneath it with a now molten hot surface. The flames had created a barrier between the men and the monster, and as the blaze began to rage out of control, the posse started to back away. It was then they heard the baby. It was not crying. A giggle from the corner of the barn made Isaac turn, and there she was, a little baby girl no more than 9 months old, the shock of blonde hair framing a blue-eyed face almost completely covered in blood and viscera. Isaac grabbed her under his arm as the posse fled the barn before the fire engulfed them. By the time the men had retreated to the edge of the field, the barn was a hellish inferno. Dancing flames lit up the night sky. Calmly, Isaac ordered, "Torch the rest. The house, the fields, everything. Leave no trace." "The baby?" Malachi asked. "Take her to the nuns at St. Martin's. Leave her there and return. And Malachi, this will never be spoken of. Do you understand?" Malachi nodded and headed east with the child.